We don't serve people like you." The words landed like a slap, sharp, deliberate, meant to humiliate. An elderly black woman froze, her fingers gripping her worn leather purse. Behind the glass, the young teller barely hid his smirk. "Maybe try a bank that's more your kind." His voice dripped with arrogance, enjoying every second of her discomfort. She inhaled sharply, keeping her voice steady. "I've banked here for 30 years. A chuckle. Another teller leaned over, whispering, grinning. "Doesn't seem like it." The woman looked around. The line behind her shifted. A businessman checked his watch. A woman stared at her phone. They all heard it. They all did nothing. Her throat tightened. "Not here. Not now. Not like this." And a chair scraped. Slow. Deliberate. The teller barely glanced up, until a shadow loomed over the counter. Jason Statham stood still, watching. No words. No wasted motion. Just ice-cold silence. The room felt smaller, tighter, heavier. The teller swallowed. His smirk wavered. The bank was about to witness a reckoning. And the teller? He had no idea what was coming next. Before continue, like and subscribe to catch Jason Statham's epic face-off with racist youngster, and comment where you're watching from today. The bank's pristine floors gleamed under soft lighting, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Every detail screamed exclusivity, a place for high-profile clients, not for those who didn't fit the image. At the counter, an elderly black woman clutched her purse, her fingers trembling slightly. She had been a loyal customer for 30 years, saving every penny, trusting this bank. Yet today, she was being treated like a stranger. The young teller tapped his pen against the marble counter, his smirk barely concealed. His gaze flicked over the withdrawal slip. "You said 10,000? His voice carried, deliberately loud. The woman nodded firmly. "Yes, I need to withdraw it today." The teller's brow lifted. "And you're sure it's yours?" A hush fell over the bank. A businessman behind her sighed loudly, checking his watch. A woman scrolled through her phone, pretending not to hear. The woman's posture stiffened. "I've had this account for 3 decades. The teller chuckled, exchanging glances with his coworker at the next window. They were enjoying this. 30 years? You sure about that? Jason Statham hadn't moved. Not yet. He sat in the waiting area, elbows on his knees, his posture relaxed. But his eyes missed nothing. The smirk on the teller's face. The condescending glances exchanged between employees. The way the woman's grip on her purse tightened, her dignity hanging by a thread. "I'm going to need ID, secondary verification. Actually, let me call security. Just to be safe." The teller's voice dripped with fake politeness. The woman's breath caught. "Security? For what?" The teller shrugged. "We have policies, ma'am. Maybe you don't belong here." The final straw. Jason's fists unclenched. His posture shifted. Enough was enough. Jason stood up slowly, his movements calm but purposeful. The bank had fallen nearly silent, all eyes now fixed on him as he approached the counter. The elderly woman looked up in surprise, her eyes widening as Jason gently placed himself beside her. The young teller hesitated, visibly uncertain. "Sir, please step back. This doesn't concern you." Jason didn't acknowledge him. Instead, his gaze locked firmly onto the teller, eyes cold, voice steady. "I think you've embarrassed this woman enough for one day." The teller's smirk vanished, replaced by a nervous laugh. He straightened, adjusting his tie. "Sir, I'm just following our bank's policies. Large withdrawals require additional verification. It's standard procedure." "Is mocking your customers standard procedure too?" Jason's tone was icy, cutting the teller off mid-sentence. A ripple of murmurs spread through the customers. The young teller's cheeks flushed red, embarrassment quickly turning to defensiveness. "I wasn't mocking anyone." "Yes, you were," Jason said, voice cold and unyielding. "I watched the whole thing." At that moment, footsteps echoed from the back, and the bank manager emerged. Initially, his expression was neutral, assessing the situation carefully. He noticed Jason and paused, clearly unsure how to proceed. The teller quickly spoke up. "Sir, this gentleman is misunderstanding the situation. I was just explaining our withdrawal policies." The manager hesitated, studying Jason's intense gaze. Clearly sensing Jason was no ordinary customer, he forced a polite smile. "Sir, I assure you, our policies are designed to protect our customers." "Protecting customers doesn't involve humiliation," Jason interrupted, his voice icy yet composed. "This woman has been banking here for over 30 years, and she deserves better." The manager glanced at the elderly woman, recognition flickering in his eyes. Still, pride kept him defensive. "With all due respect, sir, large withdrawals." "Don't give me the policy speech," Jason interrupted smoothly, his voice low but powerful. "If your employees spent half as much time helping customers as they do belittling them, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The manager stiffened, his authority openly challenged in front of customers and staff. His tone turned cold, trying to assert control. "Who exactly do you think you are, sir?" Jason's gaze locked onto his voice dangerously quiet. "Someone you don't want to push." A hushed tension fell over the room. Jason reached calmly into his pocket, pulling out his phone. With a few quick taps, he turned the screen toward the manager. It displayed the contact of the bank's regional vice president, someone Jason clearly knew personally. "You've got two choices," Jason said calmly, his voice echoing just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You give this woman the money she's earned without any further humiliation, or I make a call that'll guarantee none of you work here by tomorrow." The manager's eyes widened slightly, uncertainty flashing across his face. The teller swallowed hard, his bravado now completely evaporated. Jason leaned forward, his voice a low whisper that resonated clearly throughout the silent bank. "So, what's it going to be?" Every pair of eyes in the bank focused on the manager, waiting breathlessly for his response. Jason stood calmly, unwavering, as the bank manager attempted to regain composure. Sweat now visibly beading on his forehead, the manager forced a strained smile. His voice trembled slightly as he addressed Jason. "Sir, we don't respond to threats. I'm afraid I must ask you to step aside." Jason raised an eyebrow, not moving an inch. His voice remained ice-cold, measured. "Threats? No. I'm just giving you a chance to do the right thing." The manager hesitated again, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of customers who watched, their phones subtly recording the unfolding drama. Murmurs rippled through the room. It was becoming clear that public opinion was quickly turning against the bank. At that moment, a security guard approached cautiously. He was younger, muscular but clearly inexperienced, his eyes darting nervously from Jason to the manager. "Sir, is there a problem here?" The guard's voice was hesitant, uncertain of who exactly posed the threat. Jason didn't turn fully, but his voice cut sharply through the air. "You tell me. You planning on backing up your boss here, or doing what's right?" The guard paused mid-step, visibly conflicted. Jason's tone wasn't hostile. It carried an undeniable authority. The guard glanced toward the manager, who was now visibly sweating, then at the elderly woman who stood quietly, her dignity barely intact after the humiliation she'd endured. The guard started, clearly uncertain. "I just want to keep things peaceful." Jason nodded slowly. "Then help ensure justice is done." The guard took a breath, seemingly making a silent decision. He stepped back, crossing his arms, clearly indicating he had no intention of intervening further. The manager's jaw clenched, realizing he was now utterly alone in this situation. Seeing the guard step back, the manager's voice softened, attempting diplomacy. "Listen, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Jason interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "You embarrassed this woman, thinking no one would stand up for her. That ends now." The elderly woman glanced up at Jason, gratitude filling her eyes even as she trembled slightly, still shaken from the ordeal. The teller, who had started all this, fidgeted nervously. His eyes shifted from Jason to the woman, and he finally cleared his throat. "I apologize, ma'am," he muttered quietly. "I'll process your withdrawal immediately." Jason's gaze didn't waver. "Apologize louder." The teller swallowed hard, embarrassment flushing his cheeks. Reluctantly, he raised his voice, making sure everyone heard clearly. "I apologize for how I've treated you. It was disrespectful and wrong." The woman nodded slowly, accepting his apology gracefully, though tears brimmed in her eyes. Jason looked back at the manager, his tone slightly colder. "Now, complete her withdrawal. No more delays." The manager nodded quickly, signaling the teller to proceed. "Yes, of course. Right away." As the teller scrambled to process the withdrawal, the security guard stepped closer to Jason, voice low and sincere. "Thank you, sir. Nobody ever stood up like this before." Jason met his eyes briefly, nodding with quiet respect. "Maybe it's about time they did." The bank fell into silence, the tension fading into something deeper: respect, gratitude, and a powerful reminder of human dignity. The teller's hands shook as he hurriedly tapped keys on his computer, eyes darting nervously between Jason and the elderly woman. The lobby had gone eerily quiet, the earlier smug atmosphere replaced by anxious whispers and tense glances. Jason stood motionless, his gaze fixed intently on the teller, waiting patiently, but menacingly, for him to finish. Beside him, the elderly woman clutched her handbag, her breathing uneven, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. A printer whirred loudly, finally spitting out the withdrawal slip. The teller hastily grabbed it and pushed it across the counter, avoiding eye contact. "Here," he muttered softly, clearly shaken. The elderly woman took the slip, carefully examining it before tucking it safely into her bag. She exhaled deeply, shoulders relaxing for the first time since the ordeal began. Jason turned his attention slowly toward the bank manager, whose confident demeanor had entirely vanished. His arms hung loosely at his sides, eyes darting nervously around the room, sensing his authority slipping away by the second. "You see," Jason said calmly, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear, "this could have been handled differently." The manager swallowed hard, trying to maintain his dignity. "We were only following protocol." "No," Jason interrupted sharply. "You humiliated someone vulnerable because you could. Big mistake." Nearby, a wealthy customer stepped forward, pulling out his wallet and addressing the manager directly. "I've seen enough. I'll be closing my account immediately." Another client nodded firmly. "Same here. This behavior is unacceptable." Murmurs spread quickly, voices rising in agreement. The bank manager's face paled as the once loyal clientele turned against him openly. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jason took a step closer, his voice dropping even further. "Looks like you've got bigger problems than your imaginary policies." The elderly woman took a deep breath, lifting her chin slightly. "I'm closing my account too. I deserve better treatment." The manager, thoroughly humiliated, nodded weakly, unable to meet their eyes. Jason stepped back, satisfied. He didn't need to do more. The damage to the bank's reputation was done. The elderly woman, now standing taller, watched as justice took hold around her. Jason had delivered not just justice, but dignity. The elderly woman stood quietly, still clutching her purse tightly, disbelief and gratitude reflecting clearly in her eyes. After a moment, she gathered herself and slowly approached Jason, gently touching his arm. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her voice slightly trembling. "No one's ever stood up for me like that." Jason offered a subtle nod, his expression softening. Someone needed to remind them of their manners. Around them, the bank had descended into hushed whispers. Customers openly criticized the manager, shaking their heads in disappointment. The teller stared blankly at his computer, clearly humiliated, unable to look up from the screen. The bank manager made a weak attempt to salvage his dignity, forcing an uncomfortable smile. "We sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. Jason raised a hand, cutting him off effortlessly. Too late for apologies. She deserves better, and now she'll get it. Several customers nodded approvingly, their earlier silence replaced by murmurs of agreement. A younger woman stepped forward, helping the elderly lady gently by the elbow. "I'll help you close your account. No one deserves treatment like that." The elderly woman nodded gratefully, her confidence visibly returning. Jason turned toward the door, the crowd respectfully parting as he moved. His presence alone spoke louder than words. At the threshold, he paused briefly, glancing over his shoulder to give the elderly woman a reassuring nod. Then, without another word, he walked out, leaving the bank in stunned silence. The manager watched helplessly, realizing the irreversible damage he'd done to his own reputation. Jason had come in quietly, but left behind a powerful message no one would soon forget. This moment wasn't simply about a withdrawn amount from the bank. It was about dignity, about giving respect where it's due, regardless of age or status. Jason Statham's intervention sent a clear message. No one deserves humiliation, especially not those who've earned respect through a lifetime of struggle. In that brief encounter, Jason reminded everyone present that strength isn't measured by wealth or authority. Real strength emerges quietly, through the courage to protect those who can't defend themselves. He didn't need applause or recognition. His actions alone spoke volumes. As Jason walked away, the elderly woman held her head high, not just because justice was served, but because someone had stood by her side, restoring the dignity others tried to strip away. Everyone in that bank learned a lasting lesson. Integrity matters more than money, and silent heroism can echo louder than any words. That's the kind of strength Jason Statham embodies. Quiet, powerful, and absolutely unforgettable. Real power isn't loud. It's silent, confident, and protective. That's the Jason Statham way.